Hi guys, I hope you're well. So in today's video, we're going to be studying relationships between sentences. In your admission test, there will be some questions that will ask you to identify the relationship between two sentences. And so today we're going to study about the different types of relationships that can be found between sentences. There are about 9 different types, so I'm going to go through them one by one with you. So let's see what this says. Consecutive sentences always have a relationship between them. Consecutive means something that occurs one after the other. So two sentences that are written together are consecutive because they come right after, the second sentence comes right after the first one. The relationship can either be explicit or implicit. When the relationship is explicit, transition words and phrases will be used. When it is implicit, the reader will have to infer the relationship from the information given. Now, what this means is that sometimes the relationship is explicit, which means it is stated, right? Not stated as in, this, it's not going to be stated that this is the relationship between these two sentences, but there are going to be some words or phrases used in the sentence that will help you easily figure out what kind of a relationship there is between these two sentences. But sometimes it will be implicit. Implicit means not stated, which means that sometimes the sentences will not use any words or phrases, any specific words or phrases that can help you identify the relationship. So in that case, you will have to infer. What infer means is you will have to use the information given in the sentence, and you will have to use your common sense to sort of infer what the relationship is between the two sentences. Okay, so what I've done here is that I have given you a brief description of each of the different types of relationships between sentences. I've given you the words. So firstly, I've given you the purpose of each type of relationship. I've given you the words that you can use to identify this relationship in two sentences, between two sentences. I've given you an example where the relationship is explicit, and I've given you an example where the relationship is implicit. So I've done that for each of the different types of relationships. So let's go through them one by one. So the first type of relationship is called addition. Okay, the purpose of this is to build on a thought or idea by adding to the information already given. So sometimes a writer wants to build upon the information that he has already given us. Okay, he wants to sort of add to it. Okay, and the words you can use to recognize this type of relationship are again, also, and, besides, finally, further, last, moreover, equally important. Equally important is one phrase. Furthermore, in addition, likewise, and there are many more like second, besides, last of all, first of all, um, equally important, also, finally, moreover. So all of these words and phrases you can use to identify this type of relationship. So let's look at a sentence where this relationship is explicit. I need to finish this report by tomorrow. Additionally, I need to make a presentation based on it. So over here, this relationship is explicit because of the use of the word additionally. Okay, so we know that whenever a writer is using the word additionally, they are building upon an idea that is previously already mentioned. Okay, let's look at an implicit sentence. Harry, trying to please his irritated mother, picked up his clothes and cleaned his room. He even tried not to be picky at the dinner table. So look, now this sentence does not use any of these words or phrases, right? But we sort of know, if we read the sentence, we know that the author is building upon the previous sentence, right? Harry trying to please his irritated mother. This is the main point of the sentence, that this boy was trying to please his irritated mother, and then picked up his clothes and cleaned his own room. He even tried not to be picky at the dinner table. So this is building upon the previous idea, right? And both of these sentences are about the same thing, right? They're along the same line of thought. That's why the relationship between these two sentences is addition. So the second type of relationship is called clarification. The purpose is to clarify or expand on something that has been stated in an earlier sentence. Okay. So what that means is sometimes the author wants to clarify or interpret a certain point that he has previously mentioned. So the second sentence is basically an expansion of the previous one. Sometimes the author will also give you the definition of a word used in the first sentence. Okay, that also happens. Like he defines one of the words used in the first sentence, he defines it in the second sentence. So basically, he's sort of clarifying an idea, he's clarifying a word, and he's interpreting it for you. So the words you can use to identify this type of relationship are as a matter of fact, clearly, evidently, in fact, to, obviously, in other words, of course. So these are the words you have to look out for. Okay, so now let's look at a sentence where this relationship is explicit. I don't like spicy food. As a matter of fact, I can't handle it at all. Okay, so we know because of the use of as a matter of fact, we know that the relationship between the two sentences is that of clarification, right? Because the first sentence is stating something and the second sentence is clarifying it. Okay, because it said I don't like spicy food, and then it's clarifying it further by saying I can't handle it at all. Let's look at a sentence where this relationship is implicit. The project deadline has been pushed back. It's now due next Friday instead of Monday. Okay. So this sentence again is not using any of these words or phrases. But how do we know that this is a clarification sentence? We inferred from the information in this sentence that the first sentence is stating something. The project deadline has been pushed back, and the second sentence is further clarifying it, right? Pushed back by how much? How many days? When is it pushed back to? What is the new deadline? So the second sentence is answering all of those questions for you. It's clarifying this part for you, right? Because supposing if only the first sentence was there, the project deadline has been pushed back, your question would be, what is the new deadline? How much has it been pushed back? By how many days has it been pushed back? So the second sentence is clarifying that for you, and it's saying it's now due next Friday instead of Monday. Okay, let's look at the third one. It's called comparison, and the fourth one is called contrast. Now, I've mentioned in my previous videos that comparison is basically when we point out the similarities between two subjects, and contrast is when we point out the differences between two subjects. Okay, so they're often used interchangeably. These words are often used interchangeably because some people don't really know what they really mean. Okay, so you have to be sure of this. Comparison is when you're pointing out the similarities between two subjects, and contrast is when you're pointing out the differences between two subjects. So let's look at comparison first. Okay, so to point out the similarities between two subjects and to highlight that the second idea is similar to the one stated earlier. Okay, so in this one, basically what's going to happen is in the first sentence, the author will be discussing something. He will be discussing an idea or a subject, whatever. And in the second sentence, he will be pointing out the similarity between another subject and the subject he previously mentioned, right? So, for example, if in the first sentence he's talking about um, apples, right? So he's saying that apple is a fruit, and in the second sentence, he's saying likewise orange is also a fruit. Okay, so what happened here? In the first sentence, he mentioned a subject, he talked about a subject, and in the second sentence, he mentioned another subject and also pointed out the similarity between the second subject and the first subject. Hopefully, this is not too confusing for you. So let's look at the words that we can use to identify this type of a relationship. Also, likewise, in like manner, similarly, both, and. Other phrases are equally, in the same way, in a similar fashion, just like, just as. Okay, so, or even the word like. So all of these words and phrases can be used to identify this relationship. Let's look at the first sentence. I enjoy reading classic literature. Likewise, I also enjoy watching classic films. Now, because of the word likewise, it's very obvious that this, watching classic films and reading classic literature, these two things are being compared. Okay, What is the similarity between these two? That they're both classic, and the writer, whoever is writing the sentence, enjoys both of them. Okay, so we know that this is the relationship between both of them is that of comparison. Let's look at the implicit sentence. Our old neighborhood was very homely. There was summer barbecues, bake sales, and frequent picnics. Here in our new neighborhood, people are united by the same cookouts, gatherings, and conversations about small and friendly matters. So now, as you might notice, there are no specific words or phrases used in this in these sentences that can tell you that that the writer is comparing two subjects. Okay, but if you use a bit of your logic, you will know that first he's talking about his old neighborhood, and he's saying that it was very homely. There were summer barbecues, bake sales, and frequent picnics, right? And then he's talking about his new neighborhood, and he's saying the same thing basically, but in a different way, right? People are united by the same cookouts, gatherings, and conversations about small and friendly matters. So, even though these words and phrases have not been used, there are other words that you can use to identify what type of relationship there is between these two sentences. For example, the word same. The word same is a very big indicator that the writer is comparing the new neighborhood to the old neighborhood. Okay, so it's actually not that hard. It just requires a bit of like logic. You just have to read the two sentences again. If you still can't identify, just read it again and again until you do. Okay, because it's not that hard. It's simple English, and I'm sure like all of you can do it. Let's look at number four, contrast. To point out the differences between two subjects, to highlight that the second idea is opposite to the one stated earlier. Okay, so this is the opposite of the third one, which was comparison. Okay, so let's look at the words that we can use to identify this. After all, although, conversely, at the same time, however, but, for all that, still, in spite of, yet, nevertheless, in contrast, on the contrary, on the one hand, on the other hand, notwithstanding. Let's look at an example. I prefer running outside, however, my sister prefers running on a treadmill. So because of the word however, we know that the relationship between the two sentences is that of contrast, okay? Also, if the word however was not mentioned here, okay? For example, the word however was not here, you could still tell that the writer is pointing out the difference between two sisters, right? I prefer running outside, my sister prefers running on a treadmill. Now, that itself is, I mean, all of us know basic English and all of us have basic reasoning skills. So we know that for in the first sentence, she's saying, I prefer running outside. And then in the next one, she's saying, my sister prefers running on a treadmill. So clearly, the writer is pointing out a difference between herself and her sister, right? And we don't even need the word however to tell us that. But the word however is sort of an aid. It's sort of like a it sort of helps us to identify the relationship. Okay, but it's not that hard even without the word however. Let's look at the implicit sentence. The new model of this car has a sleek modern design. The older model had a more traditional look. Now look, there are no words or phrases, there are no words or phrases used in these two sentences, but we already know that clearly there's a difference between the two cars which is being pointed out here, right? So the new one has a sleek modern design and the old one had a more traditional look. Okay, so it's very clear that this is the relationship between the two sentences is that of contrast. Let's look at the fifth one, which is exemplification or example. Both of the words mean the same thing. So when you're giving someone an example, that's what this is, okay? So the purpose of this is to give a specific example or illustration to clarify, support, or expand upon a previous statement or idea. So sometimes we say something, give a statement, and then in our next sentence we're giving an example of that, right? So that's what this is. So the words we can use to identify this are, for example, for instance, that is, thus, including, to illustrate, such as, to be specific, and specifically. Okay, so let's look at an example sentence. Eating a balanced diet is important for good health. For instance, including fruits and vegetables in your meals provides essential vitamins and minerals. So, what exactly is happening here? There's a statement over here in the first sentence. This is just a general statement, right? Eating a balanced diet is more important for good health. But in the second sentence, they used the words for instance, and then they followed that with an example. Including fruits and vegetables in your meals provides essential vitamins and minerals. So, this is the example, right? So, there's a general statement followed by an example. Okay, let's look at the implicit sentence. The new restaurant's menu features a wide variety of dishes from around the world, from Italian pasta to spicy Thai curry. Now, there are no specific words or phrases being used here, right? They're not saying for instance, they're not saying for example, they're not saying including, they're not saying any of those words, okay? But what are they doing? They're giving you a statement over here. The new restaurant's menu features a wide variety of dishes from around the world. Okay, this is our entire statement. And then following that, there is an example from Italian pasta to spicy Thai curry. Right? So this was the first one was a general statement. The second one is a specific example. So again, this is also an example of the relationship of exemplification. So I've written down one more example for you for this type of relationship. My cousin Dave will do anything on a dare. Once he showed up wearing only swimming trunks and a snorkeling mask. Okay, so what is happening here? Again, this is a general statement, right? My cousin Dave will do anything on a dare, okay? But then the second one, using the word once over here is key. It's important in figuring out the relationship. So once he showed up wearing only swimming trunks and a snorkeling mask. So what is this? This is an example of the previous statement, which was general. Okay, so what happened here in the first sentence, there's a general statement, and in the second sentence, there is an example of that statement. So the sixth type of relationship is location or spatial order to indicate the place or location of something in relation to something else. These sentences often use prepositions. Okay, so the words you can use to identify this type of relationship are above, adjacent to, below, beyond, close by, elsewhere, inside, nearby, next to, opposite, within, without, ahead of, behind, far, over. Okay, so now let me just make something clear. Prepositions are basically words that do exactly this, right? The definition given over here, that's the definition of prepositions. Prepositions tell you the place or location of something in relation to something else, okay? So, for example, if we say that my book is over there, then over there is not a preposition, okay? So, there is not a preposition, okay? Why? Because it's just telling you the location of something, right? It's not telling you the location of something in relation to something else. But if I say my book is right next to my phone, so in this case, right next to is a preposition. Why? Because it's telling you the location of my book in relation to my phone, okay? So all of these words mentioned over here, above, adjacent to, below, beyond, behind, far over, inside, next to, within, without, all of these are prepositions, okay? Remember that. All of these are prepositions. So these sentences usually use prepositions to tell you the place or location of something in relation to something else, okay? Let's look at a sample sentence over here. The park is located adjacent to the river, providing visitors with a beautiful view of the water, okay? So what is it doing? It's telling you the location of the park in relation to the river. Okay, so we know that the relationship between this sentence is that of location or spatial order. Let's look at the implicit sentence. The kitchen is designed so that the refrigerator is next to the counter where meal preparation takes place, and the stove is near the sink for easy cleanup. So both the sentences that we read are telling you the location of something in relation to something else, right? And that's fairly easy to identify in a sentence. Like it's not that hard. They're just some basic words, all of these, that tell you that, the sentence is telling you the location of something. It's pretty easy. Let's look at the seventh one. Cause and effect or condition and conclusion. So in one of my previous videos, I have told you what cause and effect is. Okay. So cause and effect is when one event happens and in consequence to that another event happens, right? So the cause happens, which is the first event, and then the effect happens, which is the effect of that event. Okay. So if, like, I say that someone stole Anna's book. As a result, she was angry. So, someone stole Anna's book was the cause. It was the first event. And as a result, she was angry was the effect of that first event. Okay. So, let's see what this says. To describe a relationship between two events in which one event, the cause, results in the other event, which is the effect. The cause is the reason for, the cause is the reason or event that leads to the effect. Okay, so it's fairly easy to identify this also. So the words you will use to identify this relationship are accordingly, as a result, because, then, hence, in short, consequently, thus, therefore, if, then, since, so, due to. Right? So we often say that due to this, this happened, or because of this happened. So that's cause and effect. Okay, it's very easy. So let's look at the explicit sentence. Due to the economic recession, many companies had to downsize and lay off employees. Okay, so this is the cause. Clearly, this is the cause. C, and many companies had to downsize and lay off employees. This is the effect. Okay, so it's very clear. And why is it clear? Because of this, due to, right? Because of due to, we know that this is a cause and effect sentence. Let's look at the implicit one. The power went out, leaving everyone in the building in the dark. Now, look, even though there are no specific words or sentences being used here, we kind of know that this is a cause and effect sentence. Why? Because this is a cause and this is an effect, right? So what happened? The power went out, and what was the effect of that? Everyone in the building was left in the dark. Okay, so it's fairly easy to identify. I don't think there's anything difficult in this. So the eighth type of relationship is summary. To summarize something said in an earlier sentence or to reach a conclusion. So often you guys, I'm sure all of you must have read reports, or you guys must have read articles or something of the sort, or you must have even written some reports and articles in school, and you know that the last paragraph is always the concluding paragraph. Okay, and what is usually the one of the sentences in the concluding paragraph? We usually say something like in summary or in conclusion. We say to sum up or to conclude. We use these words and phrases to tell our reader that we are now concluding our report or article or whatever text we are writing. We are now concluding it, and we are summarizing whatever we mentioned in the text, right? So whatever we mentioned in the text, we give like a short summary of that in our last paragraph. Okay, and that's what this basically is. So look, these are the words we use to identify this relationship: in brief, in conclusion, in short, to sum up, on the whole, to summarize, all in all, to conclude, in brief, in other words, ultimately, in summary. Okay, so all of us are very familiar with these words and phrases, right? So this is nothing new for us. Let's read an explicit sentence. In summary, the novel tells the story of a young boy's journey to self-discovery and the lessons he learns along the way. Okay, so even though there is no sentence before this sentence, right? This is the only sentence we have. There's no sentence before or after this. We know that this sentence is basically summarizing what happened in a novel, right? And it's doing that in one sentence. And how do we know that? Because it's said in summary. Okay, so it's very simple. Let's look at the implicit sentence. The data presented in the report clearly shows that sales have increased by 20% in the last quarter. Okay, so this sentence, even though it's not using any of these words and phrases, we know that it's summarizing the report. Okay, it's summarizing the data presented in the report. Why? Because it's saying that it shows that sales have increased by 20% in the last quarter. So basically, all the data mentioned in the report, it's summarizing it in a very concise manner. And in one sentence, it is saying that sales have increased by 20% in the last quarter, right? So clearly, it is summarizing, or it is giving us a conclusion of the report. So this is the ninth and last type of relationship, and it's called time. Okay, so this type of a sentence tells us when something happened in relation to something else. Okay, so this is sort of similar to the location or spatial one, except in that one, that was telling us the location of something in relation to something else. But in this one, it is telling us when something happened in relation to something else. So it's telling us the time of an event happening in relation to something else. Okay, and this is also very commonly used when we're speaking English, right? We very commonly use this, like, first I will wake up, then I will make my breakfast, or first I will get ready, then I will leave for school, right? So what is that? The relationship between the two sentences is the relationship of time. Okay, so there are many words that you can use to identify this type of relationship: first, second, next, then, after a short time, afterward, before, during, of late, at last, at that time, immediately, formally, while, presently, since, shortly, now, thereupon, until, temporarily, previously, soon, often, and frequently. Okay, there are more words, but these are plenty, and I think these are enough for you to know, right? And let's look at this explicit sentence. First, I will make a list of all the tasks that need to be done. Then I will prioritize them based on their importance. So what is this sentence? What are these two sentences doing? They're telling you the time of two events happening in relation to each other, right? So there are two events. The first event is making a list, number one. Prioritize them is number two. So what is it doing? It's telling us the order of the two events. Okay, so first he will make a list, then he will prioritize them based on their importance. Simple enough. Let's look at this implicit sentence. Anne watched the house slowly take shape. The foundation was poured, the framing went up, and the roofers attached trusses. Her sense of belonging and security grew and took shape too. Okay, so even though there are no words or phrases used in this, right? There are no specific words or phrases used in this. You sort of know that this is sort of, this sentence is telling you the time of an event happening. Okay, how do we know that? Let's read it again. And watch the house slowly take shape. Then the next sentence is describing the house taking shape step by step. Okay, the foundation was poured, number one. The framing went up, number two. The roofers attached trusses, number three. This is the third event. Then her sense of belonging and security grew and took shape too. This was the fourth thing that happened. So you see that these three sentences, they talked about four different things that were happening, and they mentioned them in order, right? They didn't say that first this was happening, then this was happening, then after that this happened, then the fourth thing that happened was this. No, they didn't do that. They just mentioned it in order, and we automatically know that, and like all of us know, how is a house built, right? It's built step by step. First the foundation is laid, then the framing goes up, etc., etc. So we all know that a house is built in steps, or as a matter of fact, anything that you can think of is done in steps, right? So we know that because they mentioned the steps in order, we know that this is telling us the time of something happening, of an event happening. Okay, so I'm going to do some example questions with you to make this a little easier and to make sure that all of this is clear to you. Okay, so these questions can be found in the worksheet that will be linked down below in the description box. So make sure you check that out after watching this video. But let's do some examples together first. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to identify the relationship between the following sentences or parts of sentences. Okay, so let's look at the first one. Jack is a very poor basketball player, therefore he should be taken off the team. Okay, so what is happening over here? Are we doing addition? No, we're not, right? We're not building upon a previous idea. Are we giving an example? We're not giving an example of anything. We're just continuing along the same line, right? It's not that we're giving a statement and then we're giving an example of that. That's not happening. Are we doing clarification? No, we're not. Are we doing cause and effect? Yes, we are. How do we know that? Because Jack is a very poor basketball player. This is the cause. And therefore, he should be taken off the team. So this is the effect, right? So because of this, this should happen. Because of Jack being a very poor basketball player, he should be taken off the team. So what is this? It's cause and effect. Okay, so the answer is C. Let's look at question 2. George Washington was very much admired as a soldier and statesman, but in his private life, he was described by some as proud and demanding. Now, the key word over here is but. Why? Because the sentence is going, it's sort of praising George Washington, right? George Washington was very much admired as a soldier and statesman, right? So it's pointing out the positive qualities of George Washington. But then comes the word but. I taught you in my previous video that the word but changes the direction of a sentence. It changes the thought process in a sentence, okay? So, but in his private life, he was described by some as proud and demanding. What is proud and demanding? They are negative qualities. Okay, so you see what's happening over here? So, first, this sentence mentioned the positive qualities of George Washington, then it mentioned the negative qualities. So, what's happening here? When we point out the difference between something, what is that called? Is that comparison or contrast? It's contrast, right? So the answer is C. Look, it can't be time, right? Because we're not the sentence is not telling us when an event is happening. It's not spatial order because the sentence is not telling us the location of something. It cannot be comparison. Why? Because comparison means that you point out the similarities. Okay, so what this sentence is doing is it is comparing George Washington in his professional life and he's with George Washington in his private life. Okay, so it's pointing out the difference between the two different sides of George Washington, which is contrast. Let's look at the third one. The youth must have been involved with the murder. Evidently, he left the crime scene in such a hurry that he forgot to dispose of his gun. Okay, now what is happening here? The youth must have been involved with the murder. This is a statement. Okay, this is a statement that someone is making that the youth statement that the youth must have been involved with the murder. Evidently, he left the crime scene in such a hurry. Okay, now what is the second sentence doing? It's clarifying the first sentence. Okay, why is it clarifying it? Because see, if only the first sentence was here, which was the youth must have been involved with the murder, the person who would be hearing that sentence or reading that sentence would be like, how do you know that? What makes you say that, right? So the second sentence is clarifying. It's giving you a clarification. It's clarifying the first sentence by telling you exactly why, exactly how the person knows that the youth must have been involved with the murder. Okay, so how? Because he left the crime scene in such a hurry that he forgot to dispose of his gun. Okay, so is this an example? This is not an example. This is a clarification. This is not a time order. This is not a spatial order. So the answer is B. Okay, so now for these examples, what we have to do is we have to choose the word or phrase that best completes each sentence. Okay, so that means that for each of these, we first have to identify the relationship between the two sentences and then choose one of the options accordingly. Okay, so let's read number 7. When a student cheats, he reveals two things about himself. In getting help from another student, he proclaims that someone else is more competent than himself. Dash, the cheater shows his perfectionist tendency by suggesting that he is being measured against unrealistic standards. So look, what is the aim of these sentences? They want to point out two things about the cheater. Okay? So now the first thing that they've pointed out is he proclaims that someone else is more competent than himself. So this is the first thing that they've pointed about a cheater. So number 1. Then they're about to point out the second thing, which is the cheater shows his perfectionist tendency by suggesting that he is being measured against unrealistic standards. So this is the second thing they are pointing out. So what are they doing? When they're pointing out the second thing about a cheater, they are adding onto the previous idea, right? They are adding onto the previous idea. Okay, so can we use the word in addition? Yes, we can. Okay, and it perfectly fits in here. So look, let's read it. He proclaims that someone else is more competent than himself. In addition, The cheater shows his perfectionist tendency by suggesting that he's being measured against unrealistic standards. Okay, so it makes perfect sense. Okay, but let's look at the other options and see if they work. So on the contrary will not work. Why? Because we're not stating two opposite ideas, right? On the contrary is used when we're trying to state two opposite ideas. So that is not happening over here. As a result, are we concluding something over here or are we summarizing something over here? No, we're not. In short, are we summarizing something over here? No, we're not. So the correct answer is A, because we are building upon an idea that has been previously been mentioned. Let's look at number 8. The adolescent attitude towards study is that it is a task to be avoided if at all possible. At best, it is an unpleasant chore. It is begun under duress and escaped as soon as the opportunity presents itself. The mark of truly adult learning dash is that it is done with no sense of being forced. It is entirely voluntary and carried on with a sense of enjoyment and satisfaction. So look, if you guys notice that, I hope you guys notice that there are two things being contrasted over here. Okay, this is the first thing: adolescent attitude towards study and adult learning. Okay, this is the first subject and this is the second subject. What are they? What is happening over here? They are being contrasted, not compared. Why not compared? Because the difference between them is being pointed out. Okay, not similarity. So look, so it's saying that, adolescent attitude towards study is a task to be avoided if at all possible, unpleasant chore, and escaped as soon as the opportunity presents itself. But then it's presenting an opposite idea, right? From here on, the writer is presenting an opposing idea. The mark of truly adult learning. Okay, I hope you guys know that adolescent means young, young children, and adult means, of course, adult means old people, right? So the mark of truly adult learning, however, we can use the word however over here. Why? Because again, we are contrasting two different things over here. The mark of truly adult learning, however, is that it is done with no sense of being forced. Okay, so let's see if the other words fit over here. The mark of a truly adult learning, likewise. No. Are we pointing out the similarity between these two things? No, we're not. So not likewise. In other words, the mark of truly adult learning, in other words. No. Wrong. Why? Because we would use in other words if we had previously mentioned adult learning in the first sentence, right? But we're not mentioning adult learning in the first sentence. So how can we clarify it by using this phrase? We can't, right? Okay, then finally, the mark of truly adult learning, finally, no, this is not fitting at all. So however is the correct choice, okay? So I hope you guys know why, because to reiterate, however is used when you are pointing out the difference between two different things, right? And that's exactly what's happening here. So the writer is pointing out the difference between the two subjects, which is number one is adolescent attitude towards study, and number two is adult learning. So guys, I gave you a tip in my closed passage video. I told you that whenever you get a closed passage, no matter how long it is, no matter how short it is, I suggest you to read the entire thing once with the blank spaces, because that sort of gives you an idea of what the passage is talking about, right? The main idea of the passage, you sort of understand it. Even though there are some words missing, you understand what the passage is talking about. So similarly for this one, for these type of questions, I suggest you to read the entire passage, whether it's one sentence, whether it's two sentences, whether it's a whole passage. I suggest you to read the entire thing, because that's when you get the proper idea of what the passage is talking about. Okay, and then you're more likely to choose the correct option, because if you just read it sentence by sentence and you start solving it, it's very likely that you will choose the incorrect answer. Okay. Okay, let's look at question number 17. It is somewhat difficult to describe vigorous writing. It can be simple or complex, as well as formal or informal. What is the relationship between these sentences? Okay, so as you might know, that this is an example of um, two sentences where the relationship is implicit, right? Clearly it's not clear, or it's not clearly stated. Okay, so let's see if we can infer from the sentence what the relationship is. Okay, let's look at the options. Is it cause and effect? It's not cause and effect, right? Because it's not talking about an event and then another event that is happening in consequence to the first event. So this is not cause and effect at all. Is this comparison and contrast? It's not, because it's not pointing out the similarities or the differences between any two things, right? In fact, there are no two things mentioned over here. There's only one. There's only one subject, which is this vigorous writing. Okay, so it's not comparison and contrast. Statement and clarification and generalization and example. So it can be one of the two. Okay, so if we look at the sentence closely, we'll be able to figure out whether it's option C or option D. Okay, so let's read the sentence again. It is somewhat difficult to describe vigorous writing. It can be simple or complex, as well as formal or informal. Now, if you guys notice, there's no example being given here, right? This, so there is a general statement over here. The first one is a general statement. I'll write that down. So the first sentence is a general statement, but the second one is not an example, right? It's not giving you an example of the first sentence. But what it is that it is a clarification. It is clarifying, right? So the thing is, it is somewhat difficult to describe vigorous writing. And why is it somewhat difficult? It is clarifying that in this sentence. It can be simple or complex, as well as formal or informal. So definitely the answer is C. Okay, so the point is that sometimes when you read two sentences, when you read a passage, whatever, when you read the question, you cannot tell right away what the relationship is between them. But then you have to look at the options and you have to consider them one by one, right? Like first I looked at A, then I looked at B, then I looked at C and D. So look at the options one by one and start eliminating them. Okay, the ones you know for sure they're not right, just cancel them out right away, and then look at the remaining options. That will require you to look at the question a little more closely, right? To use your logic and your common sense a little bit more, but that will get you to the right answer eventually. Okay, so let's look at the last example, question number 20. Jogging provides many positive health benefits for runners in their middle and senior years. Dash, joggers tend to have a lower incidence of heart attacks than do non-joggers. Okay, so what is happening here? The first sentence is a statement. Clearly, all of us know that. Let me write that down. It's a statement, right? Jogging provides many positive health benefits for runners in their middle and senior years. That is a general statement. Now, the second sentence is giving you an example, right? It's sort of building upon the previous idea and it's giving you an example of that. Joggers tend to have a lower incidence of heart attacks, right? It's giving you an example of the positive health benefits, right? Lower incidence of heart attacks. So let's look at the examples. For example, can be used. In conclusion, cannot be used because we're not summarizing or concluding anything. In addition, cannot be used because we're clearly giving an example of the statement. Nevertheless, can also not be used. So for example, let's put for example in the dash and see if it works. Jogging provides many positive health benefits for runners in their middle and senior years. For example, joggers tend to have a lower incidence of heart attacks than do non-joggers. Okay, so clearly this is fitting. And why is it fitting? What type of relationship is this? Example, right? Because the first sentence is a statement and the second sentence is an example of the statement. Okay, the reason why this can't be option C, the correct answer is not option C. I'm sure some of you are wondering why it's the correct answer is not option C. It's because we're not building upon anything, right? We're not building upon the first sentence. We're giving an example of the first sentence, right? So building upon a certain idea would be to mention something along the same lines, but the sentence would be different, right? It wouldn't be the same thing as the first one. So, but in this one, clearly we're not building upon anything. We're giving an example of the positive health benefits, right? Which is why it's not option C, it's option A. And that's it for this video. I hope you guys understood everything I taught you. Please make sure that you go and practice the questions, the worksheet that I've made for you, because it's very necessary for you to practice enough to be able to become skilled at this. All right. And yeah, that's it. I'll see you in the next video.